Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg, and this is Drawing with Fountain Pens. Um, Today, I am having a discussion with Andrew Wong via Zoom about the last year and some pens that we've enjoyed and some adventures we've gotten into. Um, I have to apologize a little bit with it. We did this over Zoom, so there are some little sort of glitches in the video, but I think it comes across pretty well. We edited it down. We talked for quite a long time because we enjoy talking so much about fountain pens. We have very different ideas about them, but we also agree about a lot of things. And we're also very excited that next week, we're now early January, but next week is the Philadelphia Pen Show, and we're both planning to be there. And so if you are there, come up to us and say hello. Um, as always, if you want to support this channel, the best way to do that is to subscribe and give it a like. Well, here I am with Andrew Wong, and one of the exciting things at Drawing with Fountain Pens is that our friendship has blossomed, and he has become like a partner on
Yes.
this program to make it more excellent conversation.
Synergistic enthusiasm for our fountain pen love.
I want to say something though that I think is really cool about this channel over the last few years, and I've become very aware of it when I've been trying to read reviews of other products. Is that all of the pens that you see on this program have been bought by either me or Andrew. We have not reviewed. No one has given us a pen or asked us to review a pen that we have not purchased and used. And so many of the influencers, I don't mean to knock them or anything, but so many of the reviews that you read online are done by people who have been given the product to review. And, in many cases only loan the product, but nevertheless, I think there is a tendency you just sort of want to please people when they're giving you things, and we have not done that. Yeah, we stick by sort of only really talking about things that we use day by day. So that's, I think, a good thing about this channel. So, what are some of the highlights that happened to you last year in 2025
Right.
in the
Yeah,
world
I'd
of
probably
fountain
say
pens?
2025 is really kind of like the really kind of like a big awakening, like a renaissance for me and the world of fountain pens. Everything about it, the pens themselves, the nibs, the the bodies of the pens, the different materials that go into them, the practicality of pens, the luxury of pens, and then the other side of it, which is the people who make the pens, the other people who appreciate the fountain pens. It's gotten to the point now where there will be a pen seller, a vintage pen seller on eBay, and I'll start to have conversations with them about those pens.
And again, it's sort of interesting how people start out, um, collecting, using fountain pens, then collecting fountain pens, and then inevitably you sort of end up selling fountain pens because either, you have too many pens or you move on to different pens. And I know that, I've sold pens on eBay as well, though. And then one of the highlights of this year for Andrew and me was we took out a table at the Commonwealth Pen Show, partially just to sort of see what it's like to be behind a table, and it was a lot of fun talking. That's a very small pen show, so it has a real sense of community, and it was a lot of fun to be able to talk to people. And I don't think we did so well in terms of the selling, but I'm not sure that we had had the best goods to sell,
Yeah, I don't
but
think that was
we
our
but we
primary
enjoyed
goal
it.
being there.
We're No, we
It
weren't
was
really
almost like
there
the
to.
selling got in the way of our enjoyment. Actually,
Yes,
that's
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
how
No,
I
we enjoyed
felt.
it. It was fun. It was fun, and I think there are lots of people at fountain pen shows who really are making their living doing it, and of course, the bigger shows have the big companies, but there are also a lot of people who are doing it in retirement, and it's more about the love of of fountain pens than it is about, making a lot of money. And so that's cool. We're both, I think, planning to. We think we're going to be at the Philadelphia Pen Show.
That's
That's
cool.
next week, actually.
Yep.
It looks like the weather is going to be okay. That's the predicting. So, and that's one of my favorite pen shows because it's relatively small. Well, I know that let's just get into like certain pens highlights. And I know that one of the things that I have to say, and Andrew and I don't, when it's a good thing, I think we're a good team because we don't necessarily have come from the same
Right.
world. Andrew's a doctor. He's not particularly, I don't think you think of yourself as an artist, right? And I come at fountain pens from the role of an artist, and you're more someone who uses them to write with and
Right. I'm more interested in the practical aspects of a fountain pen. So to me, if the thing a pen must have is an enjoyable writing experience. So
yeah,
even
I
though
think we would agree on that for sure, but you're writing with it and I'm writing and drawing with it. So there's just that aspect.
right.
But to say is that you did something which was quite unusual, which is that you took one of your pens and you had it worked, changed,
Right.
transformed.
And it's kind of the phenomenon of hand painted pens. That's kind of a whole segment. You look at David Oscarson, he describes how the process of him making his pens is a lot like the way a Fabergé egg is made. We've talked about it. Is a pen really, how is a pen as a medium for artwork? Because whenever we talk about artwork, really a large part of the value is how big is the actual painting is, and the fact that the larger it is, it's generally more appreciated. So is a fountain pen really a good medium for artwork? Um, uh,
So you're talking about actually painting on a fountain pen. So
yeah.
so I think of fountain pens as something used to make artwork. You're thinking, and I think of them as objects that are beautifully designed. You think of them as also a possible medium to actually literally paint on and turn
Yes.
into a work of art, the way a Fabergé egg might be made into a beautiful work of art. And therefore the pleasure of the pen is not so much the way it writes, but the way it looks, like as if it were a tiny sculpture, painted sculpture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
One
so
case in
tell
point.
us what pen that you decided to do this experiment with.
Yeah, so case in point a little bit. Here's our Montblanc 149, which
Okay.
has a very classic torpedo shape, and kind of like a classic black resin, precious resin kind of color that takes pride, I think, in being kind of maybe mundane.
Hmm.
And here's a writer's edition pen, I think, with very similar dimensions, but the writer's edition is a little bit more of a luxury angled pen, and you see some of the adornments on this pen where you have
Which
the
writer
uh,
is
the
that? It's a little hard
the
to see.
inlay here. The cat
Which
band here is a little bit nicer.
which writer is that?
This one's the Voltaire.
Voltaire. Cool.
Yeah.
Famous
And
philosopher.
when I was at the Washington Pen Show, one of the dealers showed me his own private 149s, and they had maquille. He had customized maquille decorations. The Louis oyster shell long rectangular bars on his 149, and it looked really nice. But I think I wondered, is paying, let's say, four figures, $1,000 or more, to have that art put onto the pen, are we getting true value from doing that, or is it more just personal value, that the value of the pen objectively may not go up by $1,000 or more, but the experience for the user is worth paying that? But anyway, what I did was question whether or not the art on the fountain pen is should be considered high art. Is it maybe more expensive than what the true value is? How
Well,
much?
I mean, as you talk about it, I mean, it all depends on who's doing it. If I, if a famous artist were to paint onto a fountain pen, it would be worth a lot. I think about a BMW, for example, has done over the years a series of cars where they commission really famous artists like Andy Warhol and David Hockney to
Uh-huh.
do versions of their cars where they're painted. And then I have actually the David Hockney model. They then issued a small version, which is like a print of the car with David Hockney's design on it. And I have one of those. But there is literally, I guess, one or two cars that they did. They probably did one that they gave to David Hockney, or maybe they just paid him. And anyway, he's David Hockney, so that car is going to be worth a lot of money, right? But if they ask Jonathan Weinberg to paint onto the David Hockney car, it's not going to be worth so much. So it's not just, the fact that it's painted and how
Right.
presumably it is the quality of the painting that also and who does it, which might determine the value. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, show us the pen that
Okay.
you and how did it happen to be made?
Yeah, so this is a hand painted
Oh,
Montblanc
look at that.
149. So I have four 149s and I had trouble telling them apart. I thought, oh, would maybe putting some artwork on one, would that actually add to the appeal of the pen? So
That's
um
really beautiful, actually. Now I'm seeing it.
I'll send you the video of the actual process of me going into the artist's residence and
So
them
you were
painting
the
it.
commissioner, but I think in some ways also I think you were a co-creator because you were saying this is what I want it to be. And then
Yeah,
you
I
had
showed them a lot
somebody
of the
execute your concept.
Matier art and some of the
How does that
ideas.
feel when you hold it? Is it kind of bumpy or is it smooth?
It's it's a little bit bumpy. I had
Yeah.
to sand off some of the areas where the overlying lacquer um kind of went in areas where it shouldn't be. So I had to sand it down in certain areas. And so the big reveal is that this was done by a nail artist over at my wife's favorite nail salon. So I see some of the artwork that nail artists do, and so
Hmm.
I think, oh, perhaps they could do something beautiful on a pen as well, a fountain pen.
Well,
And
have you thought, what occurs to me is to do this on a pen that's not so expensive but looks very similar. I mean, there are the Mahjong, there are a whole series of Montblanc. As we know, we did a whole video about absolute, fake Montblanc pens, but there are certainly pens that are in the same vein. And then you could actually, that would only cost you 20, $30 and then have them remade in this way, and then you could resell them. It'd be beautiful, actually.
yeah,
I would buy one of those. Also, you could perfect the surface so that you could find a way to make it so that it is smoother. And I'm sure if you sort of work that through, you could figure that out more in terms of,
I
but
could
it's really
certainly
quite
sand
lovely.
down the surface and make it more appealing. I
I
mean,
also think you, as a doctor, as someone who's probably pretty skilled in certain ways with your hands, could probably figure out how to do it yourself so that it would actually be your own thing, you know?
yeah, there's on Amazon, there's certainly stencils that would make that process easier. Um, there's also almost like stickers, so kind of like designs that would fit a fountain pen because the fountain pen dimensions and curve, I think, are very similar to fingernails and toenails. So you could probably take some of that very nice art
Oh
meant to
yeah,
stick.
or print them yourself, have them printed because there's so many companies that sticker, and then you could and then enamel over it with translucent colors and everything, so you could actually come up into production. Anyway, I think it's a very, my my personal feeling though is like, oh my God, you did that to a pen that's worth, so much money, and you probably have lowered the value of the pen in terms of the market. But I don't know, if you
it
become a major entrepreneur of this kind of a pen, then the first one that you made could become very valuable. You see, that's the thing. Value in terms of collecting and in terms of the history of art is a very complicated process. It's not just about, actual worth in terms of labor, right? So that, for example, if you happen to have one of the first editions of Harry Potter, that book was, I don't know, $3. It's now worth, an extraordinary amount of money. Doesn't, that's the thing. Value is very complicated. But that's kind of takes guts, what you did, I thought. And it's cool. And
Oh,
you
I
convinced
kind of
me.
felt that if it was really terrible, that it wouldn't be hard to remove. Um,
That I find hard to believe, or because the way you remove nail polish usually is with
oh, yeah, that part,
acetate, and I
that's
think that
right.
would
Yeah,
make
so I
it melt.
realized that
Yeah.
removing the nail polish might damage the actual acrylic.
Yes,
Um,
I think there's a pretty good chance.
yeah, so I'd have to be careful with the acetone for sure. Yeah, this
Acetone, right?
149,
Acetone, yes.
it had
Acetone
a
would,
the
yeah.
feed was a little bit damaged. You can see here on the
Oh my
you call
goodness.
it the ribs or the
We're probably
gills.
going to get a lot of comments of
Yeah,
people say, "Oh my goodness." That was my initial reaction when you said you were doing it. I went, "Oh my God. Oh my God, you're." But in a certain sense, one of the things that's amazing about fountain pens, and I'm always very ambivalent about this because I realize here we are, obsessing over objects and the world is in such terrible shape and we're spending all our time focusing on these objects. But as a collecting thing, for the most part, these are not super expensive things in comparison to, for example, jewelry or
right,
watches, or there's so many things, and you can get so much pleasure out of a pen that is, $13, as well as pens that, but even in the highest end of fountain pens, we're talking about three, four, $5,000. While, if you're a stamp collector, you could spend millions and millions of dollars on a stamp that is
right,
only interesting because it was printed upside down. You know what
right.
so I think there's something to be said about that. What are other highlights, fountain pens that were highlights of last year for you?
Yeah, I've kind of gradually focused a little bit on vintage Montblancs. A lot of people will say that the pen quality and the nib quality from the 1950s, let's say, is far better than what we currently have with the different resin, probably the firmer nibs. The modern nibs are a little bit firmer, so you don't get that maybe feedback that you would have in the old pens. So I'd say that my prized pen right now is this. It's a 146. I'm not sure if I showed this to you last time.
Oh,
It's the
how nice.
striated green
Oh, pretty.
146. And it has a nib that writes with a lot of character. So when I write with it, it does flex. So the more vintage pens will flex more. But this one's,
We should do a whole video just on that pen. We'll do
yeah,
that
it's
in
been a
in
pleasure to
like the
write
next
with.
few. Let's try to do that in the next month, and then you can test it out for our
Oh, here's another
viewers.
one. This is a 19. So
Nice.
um, their factories in Germany were destroyed during World War II, but they did have a factory in Denmark. So this is one of the first pens that was produced after World War II.
Oh,
This is a
nice.
coral red button filler. So Montblanc very briefly had button fillers
Oh, isn't that
in
cool?
their fountain pens.
So that's something that Parker is most sort of well known
Yes.
for. And
Yeah.
it's that looks almost like a brand new pen. That's just gorgeous.
Yeah, I got this from someone that has a little background in restoring the resin, so or
Hmm.
the celluloid. So this is the original celluloid, but it's been restored so that the coral red pops back out. So
That's
um,
lovely.
yeah, I like the fact that vintage pens they're maybe made a little bit better, but I think paying let's say $1,000 for a vintage pen versus $1,000 for a modern pen is the fact that with a vintage pen, I'm not afraid to use it. So I'll use a vintage pen, and that won't affect the value as much as if I were to use, let's say, like a mint writer's edition pen. So if I
That's
don't have,
interesting. So you're saying that's curious. So you're sort of saying that a vintage pen, because it's already old, that you could because I tend to think of it, well, if I have a really expensive vintage pen, I'm not going to use it because I don't want to, it's an
oh,
old
okay,
antique and I don't want to use it. You're
right.
saying that if you have a new but expensive, I mean, these are all different. See, there are different aspects of pens that have to do with the brand also. So you're saying if you have a brand new Montblanc Writer's Edition pen and you use it, the value is actually going to go down.
The value goes down a lot more.
Like the way a car going out the lot. But I think the thought is, if you're a collector long term, is that at some point they're going to stop making that pen, and then, 10 years from now or
Right.
20 years from now, it's going to be worth a lot more. That's the hope. The paradox with collecting, and this is just something to throw out for people, is that I think I've said this on the channel before, is that when something is a very expensive collectible and it's new and people buy it as a collectible and they don't use it, the problem is that that actually creates a lot of those. So often the things that are collectibles years later, which are the most valuable, are precisely the things that people used a lot. Also, because the collectible market is very much often is very connected to nostalgia. Now it depends again what you're collecting, but if you're, let's say, collecting Disney memorabilia, right? Or let's say you're collecting toy cars. Well, this I know so well. So I know very well that back in the day when I was a kid in school, if you were a wealthy, obnoxious little wealthy kid, you might buy these beautiful corgi cars that were meticulously made in England, and they had little doors that opened, and they made the Batman car and they made the James Bond car, which are very valuable now. But they made
Mhm.
all kinds of incredibly beautiful cars, but they were very expensive, for a kid to buy. The thing that was cheap were the Matchbox cars, right? And you bought the Matchbox cars for like 59 cents and you use them because you played with them, right? Now, if you go on eBay, old vintage Matchbox cars valuable, while the Corgi cars don't go for anything like what they should go if you were thinking in
Uh,
terms of how, because the people who had them or still have them, they're all in mint condition because people didn't use them because they were so valuable to begin with. So there is that possibility that that will happen with the with the new Mont Blanc pens that people buy to collect, such
right.
as the
And that
writer's
will,
edition pens, because they don't use them. They just put them on their shelf.
right.
That means that there are thousands of them, while the pens that people actually use, I mean, I can imagine a world where we think of Chinese pens, right, as being, oh, inexpensive and, da 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 da. Well, it could be in
Right.
30 years that people are incredibly nostalgic for the early days of Chinese fountain pens, and I'm not saying that's going to happen, but because people didn't keep them and save them, they may
Hmm.
end up being the thing that is
Yeah,
more valuable.
collectability. I've
Collectibles
watched
are,
enough
yeah,
Antiques Roadshow
yes,
where they
exactly.
say that the three factors are provenance. So it has to have
Yes.
really indisputable history that this is what we think it
What do you
is.
think it is? Yeah.
Uh, Scarcity and demand.
And
So
demand, right.
yeah,
And the demand often is about in old things has a lot to do with nostalgia. It has to do with
nostalgia.
what
Yeah,
people had when they were a child. That said, so let me say just, because we are supposed to go over a little bit of highlights. I wanted to just hit some of the highlights for me, which was for me, it has been sort of focusing more and getting some of the pens that I don't know if they're grail pens, but I am very interested both in how a pen writes, how it draws, but also the design. And so it's been kind of cool to get, for example, the Pilot Myu pen, which is when it came out in the early 70s, I guess, was not a particularly expensive pen, but is seen as, one of the most beautiful pens ever designed. It's kind of the Concorde airplane version of a fountain pen. This is an example of a pen that doesn't write particularly beautifully. It's okay, but it's just incredibly beautiful to look at. I actually think it's probably is one of the most beautiful pens ever
Yeah.
designed.
Yeah,
And
I've
it's
noticed that.
still
I think you're
relatively
fonder of
affordable. What?
I think I've noticed that you're a little bit fonder of kind of like the sharper lines, maybe almost, if it's a term, kind of like the industrial kind of
Well,
designs.
I'm a creature too of style. People are very into mid-century modern.
Hmm.
So it is a pen that looks very much like other things that are designed in the middle century of the 20th century. So, that the most famous pen being the Parker 51, right? Streamlined, So the Montblanc pen has this kind of classic, really Art Deco, I kind of look to it, I guess, cigar
Right.
shape. And
Yeah.
probably that's the best shape I think probably in terms of comfort of a pen in your hand.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, a pen that I finally got, I was never a big fan of Sailor pens until this year I got my King of Pens, which looks exactly like a
Okay.
Montblanc 149, doesn't it? I mean, so that's the
Right.
funny thing about this whole clone thing is that after
Right.
a while, people get so used to a pen company making a certain kind of pen that they don't spend all I don't there aren't a lot of people saying, "Oh, look at those Japanese companies making clones of Mont Blanc," right? That's what this was at some point, right? Right. But it's
Yeah.
such a great pen,
Yeah.
it really, I think there are probably people out there who would make the
Yeah.
argument.
I think many will say that the King of Pen is even better than a 149, especially
Yes.
because it's a little bit less expensive too.
Right. And anyway, it writes, I discovered that it really writes just magnificently.
Yeah. And it's a
It
softer
has,
read than the
I mean,
149s.
I'm a big fan of Pilot pens too. I think, and I'm Pelikan pens. I always say the Pelikan M800 is my favorite pen. But I think for a lot of people, they are too smooth. The nibs are just
Right.
too smooth.
Right.
And the Sailor pen has just the right mix of feedback
Feedback. Yeah.
and smoothness that people say it's like a pencil, but it's not really like a pencil. I don't know. It's just it's its own
Right.
thing, and
Yeah.
that's really great.
Yeah.
On the Pelican 800 thing, this I owe to a trading
Uh, that's
with
the brown. That's the brown tortoise.
version. I still have to do
Yeah.
a review of this. This is a beautiful. When is well, this is probably from the 90s, is that right? Or earlier?
That
I have to do
is
research
from
on it.
I think it's from the 90s, maybe
Yes.
late 90s. Yeah.
There is a brown version of the 800 now, but it's not translucent like this. This
Right.
is beautiful in terms
Yeah.
of looking through it, and I have to do a whole video about it. And it writes, of course, like a dream,
Sure.
like all the other M800s, and it's just a very beautiful pen. Other highlights I have to say is on the whole Chinese pen story. I mean, I've done a lot of reviews of Asvine pens, and they really have become really good. In some ways, the Asvine pens are good because some of the higher end ones, and these are the ones that maybe are 30, 40, $50. Now you can get them with Bach nibs or you can get them with Jovo nibs. But even the Asvine nib is pretty good. And this is the whole again clone. This is a clone of a Conid, I guess is how you say it, fountain pen. But the Conid pen is so expensive. It is like it is like $1,000. I mean, I've never actually seen one. Not only is it $1,000, but whoever makes them doesn't make very many of them. So you can't even buy it half the time. If you go on their website, it's not even available. So to me, it doesn't seem so terrible to make a
Mhm.
clone. And it's not the same. It's not the same filling system. But it's a very beautiful pen. This is the V200 that I've reviewed, and it writes beautifully, and it has a vacuum filling system if you like that. So that's been cool. Oh, another thing for me, again, this is something that I owe to Andrew. So I spent, I think, two videos talking about the Omas 360 clone, which is, I have to remember which one's which. Okay, so this is the clone. This
Made
is
by
a
Moon.
storied Grail pen because of its triangular form. And I don't understand that Omas has been resurrected. It's a pen company that went out of business and now exists again. And this is one of their most popular pens in the day, in the 90s, the 360, but they haven't made their own
Oh,
version of it.
I have news for you. If you look,
Uh,
if you see the latest issue of Pen World,
yes.
they've remade the 360.
Oh, so now they have.
That's different, but that's a big part of that's what I'm looking forward to in Philly is
It's
hopefully they'll
seen. So
have.
there is now, oh, that's good news. So there is now a official Omas 360.
It's shaped the same, but they've put I think gold lining on each of the edges.
Oh,
So
interesting.
if you look in
Interesting.
Pen World, you'll see the shape is the same, but the scheme of the way it's put together
I
makes it
guess
look
maybe we
different.
have to bite the bullet and buy one of those because,
Yeah.
again, through Andrew, I now have a real Omas 360. And it is remarkable how nicely the clone was done, actually, and compare the two.
Uh,
What the clone, in this case, though, the clone's nib is not very good. And it's not, it can be replaced though. So I did a video about
right,
this. I replaced it with a Jovo nib. And with the Jovo nib, it writes really well. But
right,
it's not made sort of really to have to replace the nib. You really have to
right,
yank at it to get and be very, you have to be very careful not to break it. It's not a super expensive pen, the clone
mm,
pen.
right.
It's like $35 or something. You just have to be careful if you're going to give it a nib replacement. And that makes it a very good pen. The Omas nibs from the 90s were legendary. They are beautiful. The nibs are really beautiful. I have not actually experienced a new Omas pen, so I don't know if they write as beautifully. Um, and it's a luxury pen company, so I imagine the 360, if it's a new version, is quite an expensive pen, right?
Yeah, I think their nibs are made out of house,
Okay.
so it we'll have to see.
We'll
Yeah,
have to see. That's what we're looking forward to seeing in Philadelphia.
bring your 360 and we can compare it to the new ones.
I'll do that. That's a very cool plan. Um, I don't know if it came out last year, but it's new to me. Is Kaweco um, uh, started to make a piston pen, sport pen. And I haven't had a chance to review it, but I just got it, and actually it is very nice. I had questions about it, like what's the big deal, but it actually is a very nice pen. And then I've gotten not a bunch, but I've gotten several on eBay actually, Shown Design pens, and I always like Shown Design. I think they're fantastic. So those are highlights for me of last year. I don't have any list of what's the best pens. I would say the number one pen for me that was new to me last year is the Sailor King of Pens. I think it's gotten even. I was able to get one through the Japanese market I think very reasonable for the size of the nib, and that's a gold nib for I think under $500. But I've noticed that the price has gone way up, probably because of tariffs and everything. So even if you buy it in the aftermarket, where you then forgo the warranty, it's gotten much more pricey. But it is a really beautiful pen. Other pens that you've gotten that have been exciting?
Yeah, well, I think one thing that's interesting, I when Mary and I went to the Empire State Pen Show,
Mhm.
she's really more into the kind of what the pen itself represents in terms of how it looks and some of the designs on it. So I don't have it now, but there's a manufacturer named his name's Aram. He's from Israel.
Oh yeah, well we
Scopus.
did we did a little bit of a video on that.
Scopus. Oh, that's right. Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
pen
so
that
I
she
can
fell in love with, the
yeah.
Jerusalem pen. It has the Temple Mount. It has the old city in Jerusalem. It contains pieces of wood and seeds from Jerusalem as well, and she found that really, really appealing. So she'll actually go to that pen as almost like a meditative device. She'll actually
Yeah, yeah.
hold
Well,
on
pen
to
can
it
have
and
a
feel
whole
less
history that
anxious.
has, and that's always wonderful to go to the pen shows because there are lots and lots of people who make their own pens and they sell them. And they are really, and often really beautiful. That's usually a lot about the just the beauty of the material. They tend to have Jovo nibs, so they're not so much about how they
Right,
wrote, right? But it's a fantastic aspect of this hobby, I think, too, is that when you go to the pen shows, you get to meet the owners of the companies and the people who actually make the pens. I don't know. There's not a lot of things in that are quite like that. I think in the modern world where obviously if you go to a craft fair, you're going to see people who make crafts, and that's a wonderful thing. But, fountain pens, I think, are sort of, they are industrial. They are made, a lot of them are made in factories, and yet it's
right.
small enough that you can meet, for example, at a pen show, the head of distribution at Pelikan, or definitely you can meet the person who is making the decisions at Estabrook. And also, if you have any problems with a fountain pen, there's just this whole community that you can reach out to and who will give you advice. Sometimes
Yeah.
absolute wrong. We're doing. We will have soon a interview with Josh Lax, who customizes people's nibs. He's a nib
Hmm.
grinder or
Hmm.
nib mice master, who will take your uh, pen and make it really fit your own personality. That's another opportunity that you have with fountain pens, to customize your pen. There are some collectors who insist on having every pen that they own looked at, and adjusted by Nimmeister, right? Are you
Right.
are you like that really? You like to do that, right?
Yes. Yeah. If
Yeah.
it's a pen that I want to use a lot, I'll ask the Meister to work on it. And I'll do a little bit on my own. So I've got a little bit of micro mesh and a digital microscope that I can use to work on the nibs a little bit. But
Right,
obviously
right. You
the
can become.
Meisters are the best.
I mean, the way that a lot of these people became Nibmeisters is because they started collecting pens and they
Right.
they began to
Yeah,
learn
that's the
how
way
to
that
do.
Josh got into it.
Yeah.
He got a few fountain pens, was interested in how they worked, and now he's a nibmeister.
Right. I was amazed at when I'm amazed at interviewing a lot of pen makers and so many of them, interestingly enough, are engineers. And I thought that was
Right.
very interesting. Like their story isn't so much like, oh, I journal and I love using the pens. And they actually oddly don't talk that much at all about how fountain pens write as much as almost that it's a thing that I think they like the simplicity of it and the directness of it, and that you can make it yourself, and yet you can also perfect it. There's something about it that I think
Yeah,
appeals to them
continuous
from that
improvement
standpoint.
is a little bit of an engineering thought process, and you've got
Right.
maybe your humanities or your scholars who are more into the feel of writing with the pen, and a lot of journalists are really interested in the inks as well. How does their thoughts look on the paper? And recently, I've been getting more curious about sheen inks and shimmer inks, and
Yeah, well, that'll be something really to bring to the channel because I've never been that interested in the different ink colors and everything because again, it's an interesting world. Fountain pen, there's a lot of ambivalence within the art community about fountain pens because, for the most part, ink that you use in a fountain pen is going to be fugitive. So there are artists who don't really want to use fountain pens at all. Right from that standpoint, there are carbon-based fountain pen inks that are less fugitive, but a lot of the other inks, particularly the kind of inks that have sheen to them and all the qualities that often people like in journaling, if you hold those types of inks to light, they're
Right.
more likely susceptible to fade. So that sometimes can be a problem. I don't have a particularly issue with that, and I use ink in every different way, but it's just not, it hasn't particularly been the thing that excites me about pens, but it is very exciting for a lot of people. It's one of the cool things about the community of the Connecticut little community that we have, even though it's relatively small. I'm kind of like amazed at how varied it is in terms of, we have people who do scrapbooks and people who do
Right.
journaling and who do,
Right.
I'm a terrible calligrapher. I mean, I have,
Yeah.
in an odd way, instead, I thought that when I got into fountain pens that I'd learn to do calligraphy and I would get better and better. And in a funny way, what I have ended up doing is simplifying my handwriting. So now I write with, not cursive at all. I just block writing, and I'm trying to write as clearly as possible,
Hmm.
and with some, I guess it has some quality of expressiveness, but I just can't have the patience to do calligraphy. It's
Oh,
very
the
hard.
other thing that I have planned for the Philly Pen Show is I got in touch with one of the calligraphers,
Hmm.
Dawn Reynolds from Mod Girl with Vintage Love, and I asked her if she could help me work on my signature.
Oh,
So that's probably 80% of what I write now for work is just having to sign papers. So
the
I've
doctor.
always been
Oh,
enamored by Walt Disney, for example, John Hancock, obviously, people with kind of like eye-catching signatures.
you know that
So,
it's a little tricky though. Let me just throw this out because I had once a moment in in Europe where the person at the border questioned my signature, and it's actually I guess nowadays people don't really pay too much attention to signatures themselves,
right.
and whether they're
Yeah.
the right signature. But in the day, people did. And they questioned, they said, that's not your, why that signature doesn't match. Why doesn't it match? So it's interesting to change your signature at your time in life would be kind of interesting because people might
Yeah.
then question and say, um, this is not the right signature. This is not your right signature. So
Yeah. I'm not going to deconstruct it, but hopefully just add a little bit more flair to it.
that's true. When I was a kid, I just thought like to be a famous person, you had to have a wonderful signature. And I
Right.
hate, I hate my signature because it looks like a banker's signature or something. It doesn't look like an artist's signature.